Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to it, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, Tuesday edition of the Big Radio Show. You know what that means. It's the deep dive, the weekly top three. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets comes in to join us to give us his analysis and thoughts on everything that's happening here in the state government and in the legislature. We got a doozy for you today. We're going to dive down into it here in just a hot moment, and we're going to be ready to go with him. In hour two, I'm going to recap some of Brad's points with my thoughts as well. We might also have some discussion on the latest from the Anchorage School District, who's doing some performative theater. I don't know if you've seen this, but they're doing some, we're going to cut. We have to cut 500 positions and increase class sizes because you just won't give us the money we need. It's interesting to watch. It really is. The mental gymnastics you have to go through on some of this stuff to justify what's going on is pretty amazing. So we may get to that to later today as well. And then, of course, as always on Tuesdays, we're going to finish up with Chris Story, who's going to come in and give us a little bit of weekly uplift to try and pull us back from the edge. We're going to be hanging on by our fingernails. It's going to be amazing. Anyway, so without further pause, delay, or interruptions, let's jump into it. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us this morning to discuss. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
You know, no complaints. Nobody listens anyway. So what's the point?
Terry would listen.
She would, but I think she's asleep right now. Shh, don't tell anybody. Anyway, let's dive into this and get things started, Brad. The weekly top three, big week last week, kind of a under the radar. ISER came in, was apparently invited by the governor. He spent $90,000 having ISER redo their 2016 study. And there was a lot of interesting stuff. I watched some of the presentation and I was like, give me your thoughts here on the ISER presentation and what does it actually show us here in this last go around?
Well, as you say, ISER came in on Thursday and did a presentation. For those who didn't see it and would like to see it, it's online on the ISER page, also on Gavel to Gavel. And they're also doing it tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock Anchorage time. And you can sign up for watching it there, the web view version of it on the ISER page. Well worth, for those who are interested in this sort of stuff, well worth the time spent listening to it. The ISER presentation is sort of two things. One, it is sort of an affirmation of all of the things that we have said since 2016. It affirms that using PFD cuts to fill government deficits has the largest adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families, has the largest adverse impact of all of the revenue options on the overall Alaska economy. And it in a lot of ways, it confirms the same thing that we found in the same thing that ISER found in the 2016 study. But it also finds some changes that are significant and important. And those changes relate to the share of revenue that would be produced by various alternatives, the share of revenue between essentially non-residents and residents of Alaska that would be produced by various alternatives. And I am sure I'm going to be talking about these charts, a lot of these charts in future shows, but there's two charts in particular that I want to talk about in this segment that I think are hugely important. They both relate to the share of revenue that would be generated under various options divided between non-residents and residents. And Michael, if you can throw up the first chart, thank you. So this is early in the ISER presentation, and it breaks down the share of the impact on residents, which is in the dark, the bottom part of the column, the impact on residents from various options. The yellow is the impact on federal income taxes, which we can talk about in some detail at some point. The green, the light green that's between the yellow and the dark, is the impact on non-residents. And what you can see is the bar at the left is PFD reductions, and the analysis is that using PFD reductions as the revenue source to close the deficit takes 86% of the dollars from Alaska families. Alaska families pay 86% of the dollars using PFD cuts. The yellow portion is the amount that of federal income tax that's reduced by using that option. But the important number for this purpose is the 86%. So Alaska families pay 86% using PFD cuts. Alaska families pay 86% of the dollars to close the deficits. Those percentages go down significantly. And I'm not going to talk about property tax, which is at the other end, but those percentages go down significantly with other revenue options. For example, a progressive income tax, which we don't advocate, but nonetheless is on the chart, shows that Alaska families would only pay 83% instead of 86% of closing of the dollars to close the deficit. Alaska families would only pay 83% if we used a progressive income tax. 80%, Alaska families would only pay 80%, 6% less than they're paying under PFD reductions if we use a flat income tax. 76%, Alaska families would only pay 76% instead of the 86%. 10% less, Alaska families would have 10% less taken out of their pockets. It'd be shifted to non-residents. 10% less if we used a sales tax with less exclusions. And by less exclusions, we mean the South Dakota style sales tax that Governor Dunleavy has proposed with a twist that we'll get to in just a second. And 73%, Alaska families would only pay 73% of the burden, would only pay 73% of the dollars to close the deficit by using a sales tax with more exclusions. Significant numbers. These are different from the 2016 study in that the impact of going to sales taxes is greater. And that's in part a reflection of the increased amount of tourism dollars that are being spent in the state. So by going to a sales tax, you're beginning to pick up those tourism dollars and reducing significantly the burden on Alaska families. The other chart that I want to use with this chart because it's so important. So the 76%, remember on the last chart, we got down to sales tax less exclusions and sales tax more exclusions. So we had 76% Alaska is bearing 76% of the burden with a sales tax with less exclusions. Look at the drop that occurs when you start kicking in a seasonal sales tax, and this is actually, if it's not the motivation behind the governor's proposal to go to a seasonal sales tax, it certainly proves the intelligence of using that option. So sales tax, we drop from 76% less exclusions, the South Dakota style sales tax, down to 74%. If we use a seasonal sales tax, that is, put the higher sales tax on the months during which tourists are heavy. Tourists compose a significant share, higher share of overall Alaska purchases than in the non-tourism months. 74% if you go to seasonal sales tax. And then here's the big numbers. 73% Alaskans would bear 73% of the cost if a sales tax with more exclusions. And then look at the seasonal effect. If you go to a seasonal sales tax with more exclusions, Alaskans bear only 68% of the overall cost of closing the deficits. Non-residents are bearing a huge share. So if you put these, and I'll do this in the column on Friday, but if you put these two slides together, what you would see is Alaskans going from 86%, bearing the cost of 86% of closing the deficit by using PFD cuts, down to 68%, almost a 20% drop in terms of the share of the dollars to close the deficit, almost a 20% drop between using PFD cuts and the seasonal sales tax with more exclusions. You know, candidates talk a lot about diversifying the Alaska economy, diversifying Alaska's revenue streams, getting more outside money in to help bear the burden of Alaska government. This is exactly what this is doing. Going to a seasonal sales tax with either less or more exclusions significantly diversifies the revenue stream that's being used to pay for government. A huge amount of it is coming then from, a 20% drop between PFD cuts and a seasonal sales tax with more exclusions. A huge drop in the share being borne by Alaska families and offloading of a significant share to non-residents. Now, some people say, oh, well, non-residents shouldn't bear that. Every time an Alaskan goes to another state, either in terms of sales tax or if they work in terms of income tax, that Alaskan is paying money to that other state
right.
to help fund that state's government. Alaska's never done that. We've never had a tax like exists in the other 49 states. We've never had a tax that had non-residents bear a significant share of the cost of government. That's exactly what's going on here. And in terms of diversifying and in terms of lessening the impact on Alaska families, these are huge slides and showing a huge effect by going to sales taxes and reducing the burden on Alaska families significantly.
As you look at this, and of course, there's a lot of chastisement going on about how could we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. But again, as you point out, this is standard fare for every other state in the nation, pretty much. Washington even did away with they used to have an Alaskan exemption where you could show your Alaska driver's license and not have to pay the tax. But they don't even do that anymore. So this is I guess turnabout fair play at some point. But again, if we do grab more money from outside, the key cornerstone to this is still has to be that spending limit to prevent them from being able to spend this excess money, right?
Yep, exactly right. All of these numbers are replacement numbers, substitute numbers. So none of them are saying we grow spending. And Governor Dunleavy's been clear he wants to make sure that doesn't happen. All of these are just substitute. You're substituting in one revenue source for another. And when you and what this is telling you, when you substitute in a sales tax or you either type of sales tax, but particularly when you substitute a seasonal sales tax with more exclusions, which tends to protect residents because residents are the ones buying groceries and doing medical services up here as opposed to non-residents. When you substitute in those sources of revenue, you're significantly reducing the burden on Alaska families. So it is turnabout's fair play. And Alaskans are helping fund other states when they go to those other states. When Alaskans go vacation in Hawaii, when Alaskans go visit relatives in Texas, when Alaskans go to Arizona to soak up the sun, they are helping fund those state governments through the sales taxes they pay in those states. This is simply saying, look, when people from other states or other countries come to Alaska, and they do impose a burden on government, when they come to Alaska, they need to pay a share of the cost of government. And these are the shares. What these slides are showing is the shares that will be picked up by non-residents, outsiders when they come here.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We've got more coming up here in just a moment. That's number 1 of the weekly top 3. We got number 2 dead ahead. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more and Brad Keithley right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. David said, why should tourists pay for the cost of government when unorganized boroughs don't pay for that? Well, it's a valid question, but again, I don't think it hides or obfuscates. I don't think it obfuscates the responsibility for, people who are visiting. I never thought I'm not going to go to California. I'm not going to go to Washington because I have to pay a sales tax while I'm there. I've never taken a vacation and thought I'm not going to pay, whatever I traveled to Homer to enjoy Homer before I moved down here. I never thought I'm not going to Homer because I don't want to pay the Homer City sales tax when I'm having dinner or I'm buying something at the store. It's just, again, the kind of the cost of doing business, so to speak, Brad.
Well, that's a classic shoot yourself in the foot question. It's like, well, we shouldn't lower the impact on Alaska families. We shouldn't reduce the burden on Alaska families from 86% down to 68%, nearly 20%. We shouldn't do that because something else is going on. I mean, that's just stupid. That's just stupid. We should be on the lookout and we should implement things that reduce the burden on Alaska families, reduce the cost of government on Alaska families without increasing the cost of government overall. We should reduce the share of the burden being taken by Alaska families. And if we need to clean up other stuff, let's go clean up other stuff. But let's not continue to burden Alaska families by an additional 20%. Let's not continue to burden them because we need to clean up other stuff on aisle 6 over there.
Right. Well,
let's do the things that are important for Alaska families.
The bottom line is we're already paying for it. They're taking it right out of our PFD. We're paying for all the services that any of these tourists would use or anything else. So why shouldn't we capture a portion of that market as they're here visiting? Just like they do in their states and every other state and every other nation in the world does. Why shouldn't we? Otherwise, we're paying for it right out of our PFD.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, it's the most self-wounding thing you can possibly do when you look at these numbers and you see one approach that takes 86% out of the pockets of Alaska families, 86% of the cost of fund government out of the pockets of Alaska families. And you see another approach that takes 68% out of the pockets of Alaska families. It should be a no-brainer to say, we're going to take the approach that only takes 60. I mean, especially at the time that we're losing, population, it should be a no-brainer to say, we're going to take the option to take 68% out of the pockets of Alaska families. But some people run around and say, oh my God, we can't do that because of, this or that or the other thing. Well, that's just stupid, folks. It's just stupid. You take the opportunities that are there to reduce the impact of the cost of government on Alaska families. You take them, particularly when they're so significant as to lower that share that has to be borne by Alaska families by 20%.
I was watching the ISER presentation, and there was the whole thing on workforce. And of course, they were talking about the impacts of the various types of revenue measures or taxes on the workforce. And they kept coming back to the fact that, you can't, because the state workforce is, and what the warning that I took away from it, and I don't know if you're going to get into this later or not, but the warning that I took away from it was, look at how much the state workforce is a component of the overall economy. If you're worried about making cuts to government and the effect that it would have on the workforce, that means government is too big. Did you come away with the same feeling?
Absolutely, Michael, and that's another segment for another time. But I don't want to get that in the. I don't want people to say, "Oh my God, we should be reducing the workforce." I don't want to get that in the way. Right. Get that in the way of talking about how you pay for this stuff. Let's say you reduce government in half. There's still a question about how you pay for that half. Right. And if you have an option that has Alaska families paying less, we should be taking that option.
I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only one that was going, well, that's worrying. That's concerning right there. All right. We're going to continue on here. Brad Keithley, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We've got number 2 coming up here. We're going to jump into that. Please like and share, follow, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get more folks involved in the discussion, especially during this time of the this legislative cycle. Here we go. Let's get to it right now.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Continuing now, The Michael Duke Show. We got Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Number 2, the Binkley Family Blog, otherwise known as the Anchorage Daily News, has come up with some new stuff, and Brad is not amused. Brad?
Well, so the ADN ran an op-ed from the op-ed editorial board, and the op-ed editorial board is Ryan Binkley and one of his employees. So it's hard to say it's a board. It's sort of Ryan and whatever he thinks. Came up with an op-ed on Sunday that attacked the governor's fiscal proposal and tried to make fun of it and tried to make light of it. And basically what Ryan did in the middle of that was just sort of reveal, his own biases about how he thinks about things. Here's the key. As proposed, Alaska would tax its residents with one hand, only to pass out government checks in the form of a PFD with the other. That's classic redistribution of wealth. Well, 2 things about that. One, it's not redistribution of wealth. PFDs, I repeat myself, but it's important. PFDs are paid for out of permanent fund earnings. They're paid for out of the commonly owned wealth of the state. And what Governor Hammond and the founders of the PFD decided to do was take the commonly owned wealth and use half of it to help, fund the cost of government, essentially protect people against taxes, and the other half to be directly distributed to Alaska families. That's the source of PFDs. It comes from the permanent fund earnings. They would not be paid for by the taxes that the governor's fiscal plan proposes. The taxes would go to cover the deficits in government spending that we currently have been incurring, or we're currently incurring and have been incurring by the last decade. They wouldn't go into permanent fund earnings. They wouldn't go to the permanent fund dividend. They would go to cover the deficit. So this whole argument that, it's a redistribution of wealth because we're taking it out of one hand and we're giving it with you. We're not doing that. The PFD is coming from the commonly owned wealth of the state, permanent fund earnings. And we're just consistent with the intent of the founders, we're just distributing half of that The concept is to distribute half of that directly to Alaska families and put it in their pockets, as opposed to dispersing it in a way through government spending that has 61 people deciding where it goes instead of all of Alaska families. But the other thing about this that is really infuriating is that it does not give any weight, none, doesn't even mention it, to the fact that using a sales tax would diversify the revenue source, reduce the impact on Alaska families from 86% to 68% if you use the seasonal sales tax with the more exclusions, reduce the impact on Alaska families by that amount, and create a portion of the burden that's currently being borne by Alaska families, put that off on non-residents. This op-ed doesn't say one word about that, doesn't give one breath to the impact of Alaska families.
Right.
What's going on here is this: Ryan, whose family is engaged in tourism, and Ryan, who's in the top 20%, probably the top 5%, and maybe even the top 1%, is cruising along nicely by using PFD cuts to fund government, because it doesn't affect him, doesn't affect his business, doesn't affect him personally, takes a trivial amount of dollars out of his pockets. A sales tax might affect him a little bit more. And even though it reduces the impact on all Alaska families, reduces the total impact on Alaska families by diversifying the revenue source and putting a portion of it to non-residents, even though it has that benefit, and even though Alaska families would benefit hugely by changing the revenue source, Ryan, in his own peculiar, greedy way, is arguing it, using these old arguments, wrong arguments, to argue against it. So it's just, I mean, it is the Binkley Family Blog at its worst, coming out and trying to protect the top 20% and protect certain industries at the expense of Alaska families.
Well, what's interesting is this presupposition, which he's laying out here again, that basically it's wealth redistribution and everything else, always ignores the fact that, and something that we've been bringing up lately a lot more, is that the permanent fund, the dividend, is fully funded. That's the thing. It's fully funded by the earnings in statute. That's the way the framers made it. They understood it. The money is going to be there. And what it is that it's a disingenuous argument, because instead of saying, well, we've got to raise taxes to pay for the PFD is already paid for. What you've done is you've taken that revenue and taxed Alaskans and spent it on something else. So this is more about a misappropriation of funds or poor budgeting and poor planning on the part of the legislature. We're not redistributing wealth. That is Alaskans' wealth. That's the thing. We're not redistributing it to everybody else. That is Alaskans' wealth from the earnings reserve, collectively owned by the people. And instead of giving it to them, they're taking it. That's the thing. It's not a redistribution of wealth.
Yeah. And it is. The problem that we've got in this state is that we have deficits in government spending. We do not have enough revenue to pay for government. We don't have enough revenue from the other 50% of permanent fund earnings, plus the traditional sources, to pay for the type of government we've built. And so we need revenue in order to do that. What PFD cuts do is tax Alaskans only, tax Alaskans to provide that additional revenue by taking it out of the PFD, taking it out of their share of the commonly owned wealth. What Governor Dunleavy's proposal does is reduce the burden on Alaska families by creating a portion of the burden coming from non-residents. There's one other thing. The Fairbanks News Miner, not to be outdone by Ryan, the Fairbanks News Miner had an op-ed that says this: after years of budgetary drift, veto theatrics, and ideological stubbornness, the governor now presents a plan that asks ordinary Alaskans to pay more for nearly everything, while offering only modest concessions from the industries that have profited most from Alaska's resources. It's not asking Alaskans to pay more. The sales tax is a substitute for PFD cuts. Alaskans end up getting more in their pockets, even after paying the sales tax. They will end up with more in their pockets because the PFD goes back to its full level. And a significant portion of that burden of the sales tax is borne by non-residents. Alaskans end up, what this proposal actually does is increase the income of ordinary Alaskans. It proposes that Alaskans end up with more money in their pockets. The trade-off between increased PFDs and reduced and paying sales taxes. It proposes that Alaskans end up with more money in their pockets. So it's not just Ryan. It's not just the ADN that's off in this frolic and detour. The Fairbanks News Miner is doing the same. They're conjuring up these things that aren't right. They're saying things that are wrong in order to attack the governor.
Well, and the tone of the Newsminer article is even worse and more snarky. And again, the things that they ignore is the fact that, Dunleavy did at least, put some new taxes on the oil companies, maybe not as far as you or I would like to go, but he does at least increase the wellhead cost and a per barrel cost. So, I mean, there is something there, not as much as we want. And what about closing the loophole? I mean, those things. So there are some things that are being done, but as you said, we're already paying these things. It's not asking Alaskans to pay more. We're already paying it. We're just not seeing the money, and it's not flowing through the economy because it's going straight to government. In the form of a sales tax, the money would go to the people first, turn in the economy, be used for investment, be used to purchase things, and then go back to the government in the form of a tax.
But it's not the same. It's not the same amount of money. I mean, that's the key. The amount of money that Alaskans have to pay out in the form of the sales tax is much less than the amount that's restored through the PFD, because the non-residents are going to bear a significant share, 20% more a share of the sales tax than Alaskans than they're bearing under PFD cuts, which is zero. So it is not only the fact that Alaskans are going to do it in a different way, pay government in a different way. They're going to pay less for their government because the same amount of government. It's not, I mean, this isn't in the midst of an argument about cutting spending. We're not, that's another issue. Alaskans are going to end up paying less for their government because non-residents are going to start bearing a share, like happens in the other 49 states.
Right. And again, as a cornerstone to this all is predicated on the fact that we have to have a spending cap because we have to hold back the size and scope of government. Yes, there would be more taxes going into if we had those taxes, they would have more money in their pockets because you'd have to have a spending cap to redistribute how they're spending it. That's what the whole point is here. No, generally speaking, if you had another tax, you would have less money in the pockets of middle class. But if you have that cornerstone of the spending cap, then they would have to then look at how they spent it, and the money would have to come, from the tax, and then the PFD would then be bolstered by that. That has to be the cornerstone of everything.
Yeah, right. I mean, it has to. All of the ISER analysis is based upon each of these being substitutes for the other, all of them producing the same amount of money. And so if what you did was keep the PFD cuts and then add a sales tax on top, that's something to complain about. But that's not what the proposal is. The proposal is to restore the PFD back to POMV 50/50 and to have non-residents pay through sales tax. Non-residents bear a significant share of the cost of government, reducing the overall burden of the cost of government to Alaska families, enabling Alaska families to keep more money in their pockets.
Now, one of the problems with the governor's plan, of course, is that he's got a lot of if-come baked into the end of this thing. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. Brad Keithley is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Don't forget, you can join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show/live if you want to come in and be part of it in the chat room. We'll be back in just a moment with number 3 of the weekly top 3. You can find Brad, by the way, at ak4sb.com or on Twitter or Facebook. If you want to go argue with him out there, you can find him at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Back with more, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Tune in Friday for our weekend entertainment and movie streaming review with our guest critic, Willie Waffle. That's actually his real name. Really? That's his real name? Man, his parents must have hated him. The Michael Duke Show.
You got all these new buffers, Michael.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest here on the program. And yeah, that's what I was trying to make the point with Harold, is that his taxes are going to mean more dollars in the pockets of middle class, ? I mean, that's again all predicated on the fact that there's some kind of spending cap, because again, that's been my argument with Brad for years when we talked about a flat tax or sales tax or anything else, is that government's spending, Parkinson's principle for government, will expand to consume all available monies. This only works if we have a spending cap, a spending limit of some kind, so that then it becomes a substitution for something else.
Yeah, I'm astounded that some people don't get it. Some people don't understand that when you get more money coming back into you in terms of the PFD, and you have to pay out less money than you've been paying out in terms of over here on terms of taxes, that you end up with more money. I mean, if you get more money back in your pockets through restoring the PFD, you have to pay out a share of it, true, but you pay out less through sales taxes, significantly less through sales taxes, because non-residents are funding a big share of it. If you're paying out less through sales taxes, you're ending up with more money in your pocket. Yes, it's exactly what's going on. If you think about the PFD cuts as taxes, you're substituting one tax source for another tax source. The tax source you're substituting in, sales cuts, is lower, takes less out of your pocket because of the impact of non-residents. So it's a plus for Alaska families, and I'm always surprised when people don't understand that.
I don't know why I engage. Alaska has a spending cap. That's just disingenuous, Harold, and you know it. The spending cap that we have right now is useless as tits on a bull. Okay, I mean, it doesn't work. That's what we're talking about. That's why the Fiscal Policy Working Group made a spending cap the cornerstone of their plan. That's why every time we've talked about this, we need to have a constitutional spending cap that makes sense, that actually has some teeth. That's the problem. And so again, and this whole thing, by the way, all these pieces that the governor has put forward are all contingent on each other, and that spending cap is the number one thing. If you don't get a spending cap, then none of it matters. None of it matters at that point, Brad.
No, exactly. If these aren't substitution, if we're stacking one tax on another, if we're going to stack a sales tax on top of PFD cuts, that's bad. You have to make sure there's substitution. You have to make sure that all you're doing is replacing one revenue source, a lower impact revenue source, for a higher impact revenue source. And the way to do that is a spending cap, to make sure, or a revenue cap actually, to make sure that you're not increasing revenue as a result of overall revenue as a result of doing it. You're doing a substitution. And the governor's got that as part of his package. I mean, it all needs to be debated. It all needs to come out as a comprehensive plan. But don't think that just because he's proposing a substitution revenue source, sales taxes, that somehow that's additive. Think through the impact of replacing one revenue source, lower impact revenue source, for the revenue source we've been using, and understand why that's beneficial to Alaska families, hugely beneficial to Alaska families, by reducing the impact on them.
What do you think, as you've seen? I've already seen phrases like lukewarm, hotly and not anticipated, some other phrases as to the legislature's response to this package from the governor. In fact, we were talking about it yesterday in one of the ADN's articles about the governor, and the reception from the legislature was, well, they just don't have the time to really get down into the weeds of the governor's plan. They wish they had more time to dissect it. They're just not going to have time this session to go through it. What's your take on that, and where do you think it ends up being in the end?
Michael, I think we're actually seeing a division between those legislators who focus on Alaska families and those legislators who focus on special interests. PFD cuts are better for special interests because they don't have to go, the legislature already has the money, and they don't have to explain to Alaskans why they need more money. They just take more and more and more out of the PFD through legislative action. It's easier on them. The focus is on 60+1 The focus is on what lobbyists can deliver as opposed to what you can justify to Alaska families. And I think those who are raising issues about this proposal are those who want to preserve that sort of approach to revenues, as opposed to those legislators who are actually thinking about Alaska families and the impact on Alaska families of various revenue sources, and are thinking through and understanding the point we've been making that using sales taxes reduces the impact on Alaska families. So when you see a legislator complaining about this and saying, oh no, we can't do this, or it takes too long, or I can't think through it, or, well, but what about this? And what about that? What about the unorganized borough? What they're really doing is they're trying to deviate or misdirect the discussion down some rabbit hole to avoid focusing on the fact that the governor's proposal is better for Alaska families overall, although it does, and at the expense, I guess, of the special interests who are just fine now, just fine and cozy, continuing to suck the PFD dry because they only have to convince 660 plus one to do it.
We got it. All right, Brad Keithley, here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, continuing with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues with number 3. This time, we're talking about the end of the governor's plan, where he talks about oil production and taxes and AKLNG, and he's baked all this into his plan, which is very reminiscent to me of the whole carbon sequestration thing and betting on the if-come of all these things that are, somewhere down the road. Brad, give us your thoughts on number 3 here.
Well, the governor's plan isn't perfect, and there's some significant problems with it, particularly in the latter half of the 10-year forecast that he's got. I did a chart for the landmine column last week that looked at the revenue to be generated by the new revenue measures, the governor's proposed new revenue measures, compared to the deficits that he showed in the original 10-year plan. And as you can see, the solid line at the top are the deficits that he showed in the original 10-year plan. The dotted line, the dashed line, is the revenue produced by the new revenue measures he's proposed. The red bars are the remaining deficit, the difference between the line at the top and the dashed line, the difference between the deficits that he showed in the original 10-year plan, less the new revenue measures. And what you see is that he sort of gets close. The proposed revenue starts out low, so we continue deficits in fiscal year 27 and 28. Doesn't start out with high revenues, and then when we get to 29 and fiscal years 29 and 2030, we're sort of getting close. His proposed revenue measures sort of get close to closing the deficit that he showed in the original plan. And then they really sort of collapse from there. And what's going on at the back end is a number of things. The sales tax comes off. The sales tax is proposed for 5 years and then to expire. That's what gets him close. The sales tax is what starts to get us close in 2029 and 2030. When you take the sales tax off, when it expires, revenues collapse, but the deficits don't. The new revenues collapse. The other thing that's going on is he's taking the corporate income tax to zero in those latter years, and just like terming the sales tax, when you take corporate tax revenues, both general corporate income tax as well as the petroleum corporate income tax, when you take those to zeros, revenues collapse and the deficit grows again. There's a couple of things I think to be said about the governor's proposal. We shouldn't be taking the corporate income tax to zero because it costs too much in terms of revenue. No other state, I don't think, has zero corporate income tax. We shouldn't be terming the sales tax I mean, all that would do is say, yes, we've replaced PFD cuts with the sales tax, but the sales tax is only going to be there for 5 years, and then we're going to take away that revenue too. Well, what that's going to lead people to think is, okay, well, we need to go back to PFD cuts because we're going to need revenue, not even increasing spending. We're going to need revenue to fill the gap that the expiration of the sales tax is going to do. So the sales tax, the term of the sales tax needs to be something that's looked at very closely, and I don't think we need to have an automatic termination of it. But the other thing this chart's telling you is that the proposal on oil taxes isn't very solid. It is the governor's proposal to for a term take the minimum oil tax, minimum production tax from 4% to 6% doesn't produce a whole lot of revenue. We've talked about the fact on previous segments, we'll talk about it again in future segments, that oil taxes are about $400 to $500 to $600 million low, below the level that they should be. If you just look at the last 10 years, the level of production, the level of revenues that production taxes produced, and you look at closing the Hillcorp loophole, the revenues we should be getting from oil permanently are about $400 to $600 billion more than we're getting. What the governor's proposing is a change that produces a little over $100 million and only does it for a short term. So if you did oil taxes the way they should be done, as opposed to this sort of very slight touch that the governor's putting on it, if you did oil taxes the way they should be done, you're going to end up with another $300 to $500 million in additional revenue, and you're going to have it for the entire period as opposed to the limited period that the governor has proposed to increase the minimum. What that would do is increase the dash line. You would increase the dash line by $300 to $500 million, and you would close the remaining gap, come very close to closing the remaining gap in the years where you also have sales taxes and you still have corporate taxes in effect. And that gap would remain closed on out into the future by closing by also continuing sales taxes and keeping corporate taxes alive. You'd also maybe in some years be able to reduce. I mean, you'd have to look at the impact of raising oil taxes to where they need to be, but you also might be able to reduce the sales tax from a 2 to 4% seasonal sales tax down to a 1 to 3% sales tax if you were getting full oil revenues. So it's something we need to look a lot at the governor's proposal on oil revenues. It doesn't raise oil taxes. It doesn't raise the revenues that Alaskans are entitled to in terms of the share of oil revenues that are going to the state. There's one other thing. The governor will say in 2030, 2031, you start looking at that drop on the chart, the huge drop in revenues, the dash line going down and the bars increasing. The governor says that's closed by two. The governor's proposal says that's closed by two things. One, increased oil production. Problem is the only oil production we see out there, and no one's foreseeing any different, is the big fields of the Willow Field and the Pica Field, and the additional revenues that they're going to produce. Those are already baked into these numbers. So there's no additional oil revenues that are out there that are going to help close that gap. The governor says the other thing that's going to help close the gap is the AKLNG line. But the AKLNG line is highly speculative. It's ludicrous to start basing your fiscal policy 5 years down the road on the AKLNG line coming in. If it doesn't come in, and it's not, if it doesn't come in, that dash line is going to continue to show where your revenues are going. So we need to clean this up, and I'll do this in the Friday column. We need to clean this up to show how much the governor is depending on these phantom increased oil revenues and on AKLNG to close this gap and to highlight that gap is likely not going to be closed. Highly unlikely that it's going to close those gaps, and that we need to continue to have revenue sources to meet the gap that we've shown in there. And this isn't increasing spending at all. These numbers incorporate the effect of the governor's proposed spending cap. This isn't piling taxes on top of other things in order to increase spending. This is keeping spending within the limits proposed by the governor. So the deficits are showing up because revenues are going away, and we need to keep those revenues there. And in the case of oil taxes, we need to build additional revenues to get up to the $400 to $600 million level that Alaskans are entitled to.
Right. Well, and again, this is betting on that. This is history repeating itself, betting on the if come. Oh, we think that this is what's going to happen. We thought we were going to get tens of $millions in carbon sequestration. We thought that this was going to go on. Brian in the chat room just said we could also bet on oil at $110 a barrel as well. Right. I mean, we can just make stuff up at this point. And that's part of the problem, is that we got kind of this pie in the sky attitude. This is why we should be changing the way we do budgeting and do funding for the budget in the state, and create a 5-year rolling average so we can look at historically what our revenue has been, instead of this, oh, here's what we think it's going to be in the future, right? I mean, this is, again, pie in the sky.
It is. What one interesting thing about this, Michael, is the projections we've seen of revenues from the Alaska LNG project are heavily influenced by the proposed corporate income tax that would be imposed on the Alaska LNG project. A big share of the revenue coming from the Alaska LNG project is through the corporate income tax on the project. The governor proposes to eliminate the corporate income tax. So a lot of the revenue that his own projections, the administration's own projections, have said are going to come from the AKLNG project, even if it occurs, come from a revenue source the governor's eliminating. So there's a lot of adjustments that you need to make as you look at these numbers going out in terms of the revenues that they're going to produce.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Down to the last minute and a half, 2 minutes here, Brad. If you were king for a day, and you know, again, this governor's plan is from 4 to 6, and just this mile, 13 cents a barrel kind of, what would you do to get that full fair share for Alaskans of their resources from the oil companies?
Yeah, I just take the oil tax, which is highly complex, and I know why we did it, but it's proven too complex and it just sort of implodes on itself. I just take the oil tax and just change it back into a share of the gross, and make the share of the gross the same, the percentage of the gross the same that we experienced in the last decade, under the first decade of SB 21. That produces $400 to $500 million, and it keeps Alaskans' take level going into the future, level with the level of take they've had in the last decade. It doesn't increase taxes; it maintains the tax levels that Alaska has had. So instead of playing around with the minimum, I would just go straight to a share of the gross and set that share at the same level that we've experienced in the last decade.
And that means an additional $400 to $500 million in revenue for the state in taxes on the oil companies on our resource, which, according to the Constitution, they're supposed to be getting the maximum benefit for. But we'll see how that works. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thanks for coming in and joining us.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got more coming up. We're going to continue right after this. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back. And Brad, Corey says, and not a single mention of better investing the PFD, such as an S&P style. The governor doesn't even touch that, right? I mean, this is something, and I'm so surprised that more candidates aren't coming to you for more details on this, because, again, this could be, again, another couple $100 million a year that we could be seeing right off the bat if we just changed how we were investing that, right?
Yeah, and all that goes to increased oil taxes, all of that, and better returns from the permanent fund. All of that would go to reduce the sales tax. All of that would go to reduce the amount of revenue we need to be raising from some source of tax. So, you know, sales tax is better than PFD cuts, certainly in terms of their impact on Alaska families. But oil taxes at the historic rate at the last 10 years, not trying to get an increase, just trying to maintain the level of gross revenues that come to the state through oil taxes. Oil taxes certainly are better than a sales tax, because they reduce the amount of sales tax that we need to fill in the remaining gap.
Bradley asks, he says, Brad, is it even possible to have a sales tax and a state income tax, but get rid of a property taxes completely in Alaska and get the majority of the PFD? Most Alaskan property taxes have gone up roughly 40% in the last 4 years, as we all know. Now, keep in mind, I'm not the brightest light bulb, just trying to learn this stuff better.
Yeah. So property taxes are a revenue source for local governments. And all that money is going to local governments to try to substitute out sales and income taxes for property taxes. You'd have to do one of two things. Either it's the local governments that would have to institute those additional tax levels to replace the property tax, or the state would have to start sharing more revenue that it's getting through the its sales tax down through to local governments to reduce their need on property taxes. It's complicated by the fact that you're talking about two different levels of government and how they're raising revenues to fund themselves.
Right. And again, a tax or a spending cap would have to be cornerstone to that so that they wouldn't consume the additional revenue, the additional taxes, and spend those as well on top of everything else. And that's the biggest problem. I don't know, Brad, give me Vegas odds here on this as you see it. Is the legislature even going to take this up, or are they just going to ignore it for one more year? Spend the money out. What do you think is going to happen here?
I think the dynamics are going to be interesting. If the governor will go on a sales pitch, if the governor truly believes in this approach, and it looks like he does, and the governor will go on a sales pitch in conjunction with ISER, and we'll talk about replacement revenues as opposed to increased revenues. The governor will go on a statewide sales pitch. It'll bring a lot of pressure on the legislature. If the governor doesn't do that, and legislators are just left to their own natural instincts, I mean, as I said, we're seeing a division between the legislators who are looking out for special interests and the legislators who are looking out for Alaska families. And basically, the legislators who are looking out for special interests are the committee chairs and the ones in control of the pace at which legislation gets considered right now. So the governor has to overcome that through a public relations campaign to stir up understanding, to create pressure on the legislature to make those changes to reduce the impact on Alaska families. And if he does that, I think there's an increased likelihood of it getting through. If he doesn't, if he stands back, if he doesn't get out there and talk about it a lot, if he doesn't write op-eds, then I think the natural instincts of the legislature will be to, just protect the special interests and keep on going the way they're going, taking money out of Alaskans' pockets, taking most of the money out of Alaskans' pockets.
I'd be interested. I mean, I think if we got a constitutional spending cap on the ballot for people, I think that they would vote for it. I really do. But it would have to be one that would work. The scariest part for me on this whole ISER report was how much one of the pillars that they were focused on was a statewide property tax. And that just gave me the heebs every time I looked at that. They talked about that as well. That's all I could think of. I'm already paying a borough property tax. That's all I need to do now is pay a state property tax on top of it.
It's not a realistic option that they put in there. It was in there. It was in the 2016 study. So when they said they were redoing the 2016 study, it got picked up as part of that. But if you look at who the burden hits, the burden of doing a statewide property tax in terms of the impact, in terms of the share coming from Alaska families, is as great or almost as great from a property tax as it is from PFD cuts. Right. Sales taxes are much better than that. So I don't think that the statewide property tax is a realistic proposal. It's just one that got put in there because it was there in 2016.
Final thoughts, Brad. We've got about a minute and a half here. Final thoughts for today and where we're going in the legislature in the session this year.
Well, I think the ISER study has changed the dynamics here. I think the ISER study makes very clear, and I think the continued discussions about this will make very clear that Alaska families would pay less under a statewide sales tax than they're currently paying under PFD cuts. They'll end up with more money in their pockets. Alaska families will have more money in their pockets by restoring PFDs, and even if they were paying a state sales tax. And I think that's a huge sea change in how people have been looking at this all along. That sort of gap between what a sales tax would do in terms of non-residents and PFD cuts was not there in the 2016 study. The gap was very small. Demonstrates the growth of our visitor industry, demonstrates the growth of non-resident dollars between 2016 and 2026. But now that gap's there, that's important.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You can find him again over on Facebook, on Twitch, or Twitter, rather, X, everywhere else. Brad, thanks so much for coming on board. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being part of it today. All right, my friends, that does it for us in hour one. Hour two is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet, MichaelDukesShow.com is where you find us there, and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to hour two of the big radio show. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He came on board to talk with us about some big things here happening in the legislature and an analysis of the governor's plan as well, the proposed plan, which is not getting a lot of play. Not getting a lot of play right now, and not being treated with is kind of being treated in some way with disdain out there as well. Now, everything that Brad talked about, and I want to keep coming back, and I want to keep hammering on this because the bottom line is that this is all predicated on the idea that we have some form of spending, cap, right? That's what is the key to this whole thing, is that we have to have some kind of limit on government, because as I've said, and as many people in the chat room have pointed out, if we have a sales tax, well, they'll just spend that money too, right? There has to be some form of limit on what the government will spend. And that's been the biggest challenge, is that government has consumed all the available resources. We saw this from in the 2010s when Sean Parnell was governor, and he kept building budgets based on $105 a barrel oil when it was $75 and everything else. We saw this deficit spending. Now, ironically enough, many of the players who were around then are still around now, and now they're acting shocked, I tell you, that they have no more money to spend. Oh, how did that happen? We just don't know how that happened. And the bottom line is, this is where we've been at for years. Every dollar that was available, they sucked it up. Every dollar that they could find. So the key to this, the key to the fiscal policy working group plan from 2021, all of it was built around the idea that we have to have some kind of limit on what government spends. Now, as Harold pointed out in the chat room earlier, with this big brain. We already have a spending cap. Now, the problem with the spending cap that we have right now is that it's meaningless because the way it was built, it allowed government to grow. I mean, we could spend $10 billion and still be inside the spending cap right now instead of the 6 that we're spending, right? It's meaningless. So what we need to do is adapt it and adjust it. And as I said earlier, if you came to Alaskans, I think, at the polls, regardless of what their political affiliation is, because I think overall, most people, when the question is put to them specifically, should we limit the size and scope of government? Should we limit the government spend to, the cost of inflation? Or should we, when it's put forward to people in that way, regardless of their political affiliation, the knee-jerk reaction, I think, for most of them is, yes, they should be limited just like we're limited. We saw that 2 years ago in May when the Fairbanks North Star Borough tried to bust their tax cap, their spending limit, with that $10 million question on their ballot, where do you want to go over the tax cap by $10 million to pay for education? And surprisingly, in Fairbanks, where things have turned pretty blue, they said like 70-something% said, no, you shouldn't. I would really love to see a true, honest, well thought out spending cap get onto the ballot. Constitutional, but not a statutory, a constitutional spending cap get on the ballot. Because I believe that the majority of Alaskans would vote for that. Now, that's probably one of the reasons why that will be the biggest fight you'll see in the legislature this year. Of any of the parts, of any of the components of this whole plan, that will be the one that will draw the most fire because, let's face it, the legislators don't want to stymie their ability to spend what they want on what they want. They just don't want, even though the reality is now slapping them in the face like a dead fish, that there is no more money. The idea that they would somehow be constrained in the future is anathema to what they want to do. So I think that is going to be the biggest hurdle in this whole thing. I mean, we're talking sales taxes, oil taxes, all that stuff. The most contentious thing, although it's kind of flying under the radar in the public discussion right now, the biggest thing with the biggest is going to be a spending limit. Because the lunatics are running the asylum and they don't want to have any oversight. They don't want to have anybody pushing down. They don't want to have anybody pushing down on them. And like I said, even in Fairbanks, where the philosophy there is much more progressive than it used to be. The Fairbanks area is turning more blue than it was, red before. Now, it's definitely leaning towards the purple blue area. Even they said no. And it is, I think it's going to be the biggest lift. I think it's going to be the heaviest lift of this session in putting together a constitutional spending limit. Statutory cap doesn't matter because we know the legislature can just ignore statute. We have seen in the past where the legislature has passed a statutory spending cap and in the same session busted that same cap. Oh, because this is very important. We know that we passed that, but this is very important. We need to spend this and do the thing. Donna Ardwin, one of our favorite people in the world when it comes to understanding governmental spending, she said a governor can create a unilateral spending cap by vetoing money spent over the cap. Florida's spending limit is disciplined governors. And she's not wrong. But then again, you have to have a governor who's willing to take that stand and to go over those cuts, and B, you have to have a legislature that at least has enough members to stand by the governor so that it won't get overridden. So while that is an alternative to having a statute or a constitutional spending cap, it requires intestinal fortitude on the part of the governor, and it requires intestinal fortitude on a minority of the legislatures who are willing to hold the line and stand with the governor in those kind of vetoes. It makes it much more difficult to hold that down. Senator Rob Myers also in the chat room. He said people voted to uphold the tax cap because they didn't want to pay extra. A spending cap won't have that backing without a broad-based tax. And it's true. It is a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison. But again, I think if you hit this goes back to my conversation with then Senator Peter Machicki, who's now borough mayor of the Kenai Peninsula Borough. But at the time, he was a senator when SB 26 was voted on. And that is the POMV model for the PFD. And I had him on the program as they were discussing this before it was passed. And I asked him at the time, I said, you know, Senator Dunleavy, who, again, Dunleavy was senator at the time, had proposed putting this up to a vote of the people. Should we change the way that we process and formulate the PFD? Because that's really the question that the POMV draw. That's really the question that it proposed to the people. And I said, Senator Dunleavy is proposing that we put this to a vote of the people. Why wouldn't we do that? And Senator Machicki's response was very telling, because he said, well, because people would vote with their pocketbooks. And we don't want, I mean, essentially, we don't want that. We don't want them to vote with their pocketbooks. I mean, that's the thing. I think if you put a spending cap in front of the people, a constitutional one that drew down and held down the growth of government, the uncontrolled growth of government, which is what we've had. It's what we've had in the last 20 years in the state, 30 years in the state. It got real bad there in the middle in the teens. If you put that in front of the people, I would put money down that the majority of people would vote for it. And that would solve a lot of the problems, because then any new tax or revenue, whatever you want to call it, any new tax measure, any new revenue measure would then be offset by that spending limit. And it would mean that we could free up parts of the PFD, which is already paid for, and that we would be paying for parts of government with those taxes instead. Instead of the stealth tax on the PFD, it would be paid for by a sales tax or some other, you know, the excess oil taxes, things like that. Those things. But the spending cap has to be the cornerstone of that. That would be the important part. It's key to what we're dealing with here. And it's interesting. It's interesting that this is kind of where we're at, that all of a sudden they've discovered religion, right? Oh, now we've got to do something. Now we've got to, you know, but don't forget, we don't want the public to pay attention to that.
Senator Stedman. Well, the Senate president listed off of a series of headwinds that we're facing. I just don't want the public to dwell too much into that arena. You know, we see them coming. We're going to try to deal with them.
We see it coming. I just don't want the public to dwell on that. The public should dwell on that. The public should be engaged. But see, that's what they want. They want the public to just kind of ignore it. We're down in Juneau. We're in our bubble. You guys just don't pay attention. Don't worry. We got this. Though we got you, boo. We got you, bro. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Yet you're the guys that got us into this position. That's a huge problem. But here we are. Now, again, now we've got legislators who are telling us when the governor produces a plan, and he wants to, you know, he's at least not a perfect plan by any means, but at least a starting point and a discussion. And they say, well, it's going to be difficult to give the governor's plan the kind of careful consideration needed. You got something else to do? I mean, I'm sorry. Was there some other priority that you should be working on? House and Senate leaders commended the governor for putting forward a revenue proposal after years of tight budgets. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Governor should have done this a lot sooner, instead of, after the whole, Donna Ardwin's advice and the budget cuts and everything. And he got his hand slapped hard and he kind of rolled over and wet on himself and spent 6 years, nursing his wounds. And then he comes out at the last minute. So again, fair. But even after all that, they said it would be difficult to give the governor's plan the kind of careful consideration needed. Why? Why is it difficult? What is the difficulty to give the governor's plan the kind of careful consideration needed? What is there? I mean, is there a timing thing? Is there again, what else do you guys have to do down there? Isn't this kind of your whole thing? Isn't the main responsibility of the legislature dealing with the budget and long-term fiscal plans? We just don't have time because it's an election year and it's the second half of a session and we just don't have time. No, that's a prioritization problem. That's a you problem. Difficult to give the governor's plan the kind of careful consideration needed. Jack, you're running out of road. There ain't much left. There's a big fiscal cliff ahead. You may want to think about taking a look at this. I mean, I just looked at that sentence and I just read it over and over and over again. I'm like, why would it be difficult to give the plan consideration? Well, again, it's got components in it like a constitutional spending cap that would make people leery of giving up that power. That's what it is. How do we diffuse that, right? We stretch it out. Oh, we just can't get to it this year. What? You got a hot date somewhere, right? You got a little tryst at a local Juneau hotel that we don't need to know about? Is that what you're busy doing? Oh man, that's the whole thing. We're going to get into that later on. That's the whole Suzanne Downing thing about all the as the world turns stuff going on down in Juneau. But I mean, is that the question? You got more going on? More going on that we need to know about? I mean, what are you guys? Are you nursing the hangover from the beer pong that you played last night? Is that why you can't get to it? Yeah, Barbara just said, don't want the public to dwell on that. Sounds a lot like, don't worry your pretty little heads about it. Most women, no, that's when you really worry. Right, it's like they're patting us on the head. We're little kids. Oh, don't worry. Brian says, this is a trust us moment. We've screwed up all the time, but now you can really, really super trust us now. Again, this is all the stuff that was coming down. And people like Bert Stedman and Lyman Hoffman and all these people that have been there for decades are part of they brought us to this point. But right now they're like, oh, no, we don't want the public to.
Senator Stedman. Well, the Senate president listed off of a series of headwinds that we're facing. I just don't want the public to dwell too much into that arena. We see them coming. We're going to try to deal with them.
Trust me, we got this. Don't worry. We're all over this. All right. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Just don't. It'll be fine. Stop looking. Stop looking. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Continuing on here. Taxes are inevitable. Jeremy said, I can't believe Governor Mike wants to tax us. I was floored. And then he thinks he's going to replace the Merc. Taxes were inevitable, Jeremy. We're already being taxed. They're already taking 3/4 of your PFD, almost 3/4 of it. So you were already being taxed. This, in its way, with a spending limit, with a spending cap, would put more money back into your pocket, at least, because a big portion of that would be picked up by people outside. But, it's just one of those things. Rick says, Brian, I honestly don't believe there are enough people in Juneau that are efficient in money management. They just don't know how to do it. I think it's that simple. Yeah, that, again, every problem that we're talking about, all these things that we're looking at, all come back to mismanagement. Right? What did Barbara say earlier? She said the school district found the money. They had it siloed or something. I'm scrolling backwards here because I saw the comment in passing, but I didn't know the context of it. But again, this goes right back into this whole thing with the Anchorage School District. They're going to have to make all these cuts, and it has to do with mismanagement of the funds. They did things with the money that they received that they weren't supposed to. They spent one-time money on reoccurring costs, and then were shocked when that one-time money went away. Here it is. This is from 20 minutes ago. She said, and it turns out the school district has the money, but they kept it siloed. So again, this is mismanagement all over again. All over again. I'm just scrolling backwards here. The spending cap has to be constitutional. We talked about that. It cannot be statutory. And it has to have some teeth in it. We have to game it out for 20 years from now, not just this year or next year, but from 20 years from now. Corey said they either have way too much money in their personal finances or are in extreme debt. Either way, they shouldn't be representing us. Okay. And Harold's now on an ICE rant about everybody's going to get picked up by. Jesus, dude, take your meds. Take your meds and relax. Not that we're even talking about that. I'm still scrolling backwards. Here on any of the big comments that I missed. Harold did say something good. He said, Doomsday Donna, too bad Alaska didn't implement her ideas. He's talking about Donna Ardwin. The state would be thriving today. That's a fact. Well, I do agree with him on that. Let's see. Morning testimony. Tax bill 284. Morning testimony at 9 a.m. on Thursday. Watch this to see who wants more money. The Alaska Municipal League, which is a consortium of local government to get more money for them. That's what it's about. Again, all these governments are looking for more and more. Oh, give me more. That's what they want. They want more. That's what they're looking for. More. All the time. Dave Tallarico, don't want the public to dwell on that. I'm thinking that cat's out of the bag. Yeah. Exactly. Hello. All right. Let's continue. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the stuff. Here we go.
public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're continuing now. One final segment. Chris Story is going to be coming in here in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking with him about our weekly uplift and getting our weekly life coaching lesson from him. It's always good, especially after we finish up with Brad, because Brad always has a tendency to spark a heated conversation in many ways. Good stuff. Don't get me wrong. Good stuff. But a heated conversation in many ways. We're finishing up talking about what Brad Keithley was covering and all the things that he was going over. I want to shift gears just a little bit here. I think I have enough time? I'm not going to spend a lot on this. I might dive into this tomorrow or Thursday. But this article that came out here a couple days ago about the Anchorage School District, and that they are proposing major cuts to positions, programs, sports, and more. The Anchorage School District has reached the end of their rope, folks. They're here to tell you, we just can't do any more. And they released a preliminary budget last week that cuts over 500 positions and increases class sizes. This is all to balance a $90 million structural deficit. Now, sidebar for just a moment. They have got many of their schools are at about 50% capacity. Many of their schools are at 50% capacity. The simplest things that they could do is to consolidate the schools and bring the students, together to where you had an 80 or 85% capacity of those schools, and you would drastically reduce the number of schools that you needed to upkeep, maintain, and take care of. You'd reduce the number of teachers that would fit in those schools. I mean, there would be a reduction in teachers. There'd be a reduction in janitorial. That would be the first thing that you should do. When you see that the Anchorage School District has lost what? David Boyle's in the chat room, but if I remember correctly, the number is something like 7,000 students in 10 years. 7,000 students lost in 10 years. You would think that consolidating the schools would be the first thing that they do. No, instead they knocked down a school that was at a lower capacity, and then they built a smaller school, so now that capacity's up, but they spent the initial price tag was 20-something million. They spent $50 million building this new school. Because that makes sense. Anyway, in a letter sent to families, the superintendent, Jarrett Bryan, said that maintaining the status quo is no longer sustainable. Well, anybody with half a brain could have told you that. When you lose 7,000 students, you cannot hold the status quo, because your budgets are based on the number of, I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk to you like you're five, Jarrett, but your budgets are based on the number of students you have. And when you lose 7,000 students, your budget is going to go down, even with inflation. He said there's no remaining one-time solutions that that can close the gap of this magnitude without affecting staffing levels and school operations. Okay, we understand that. Businesses understand that when your revenue declines, when your share of market declines, you have to do things like changing staffing levels and changing your operations. Big shocker. Inflation and rising operating costs have outpaced school funding from the state and federal government. Well, it's also because you continue to try and hold things the same. You try to keep that status quo. Duh. Again, when you have less students, you can't maintain the status quo. Oh, this is the beautiful part, though. He wrote that he was thankful for the $700 BSA increase passed by state lawmakers, but he said it was not enough. He said a $1,400 increase to the BSA would be needed to maintain funding levels from 2011. Again, over that same period of time, they've lost, I got to see if David has hit me with this, because I think it's 7,000 students. I believe it's 7,000 students in that same, I don't have it right up here in front of me. I have it marked somewhere, but thousands of students. So, of course, you can't maintain the same thing from 2011, 15 years ago. But that's their goal, $1,400 increase on top of what we got. So what are they going to do? Well, dozens of district office positions will be eliminated. They're proposing deep non-classroom reductions, which I applaud that. Keeping as many teachers in the classroom is important. How much administrative bloat? How much overhead do you have? $600 million budget. That's what they've got. $601 million budget proposal. Would increase the class sizes by an average of 4 students for every grade level. It would cut over 300 teaching positions. Move school nursing to a regional-based model by cutting 25 positions and cut principals and counselors. Okay. I mean, okay. That's what it is. It is what it is. School board member Kelly Lessons noted that district officials have known they were facing a pending fiscal cliff for years, but have refused, this is my comment, have refused to do anything proactively about it. They knew they were facing a fiscal cliff for years. They attempted to continue to do the status quo until it was just no longer viable. They refused to be proactive about it. They've known they were facing a pending fiscal cliff for years, but COVID-19 era funding and one-time appropriations from the legislature helped the district stay afloat. Read that again. It's from the ADN article. Just listen to this again. Kelly Lessons noted that district officials have known they were facing a pending fiscal cliff for years, but COVID-19 era federal funding and one-time appropriations for the legislature help the district stay afloat. i.e., they bought a little time to remain at the status quo. They used one-time federal funding to keep the status quo going, to keep the party going for as long as possible. Instead of being proactive, knowing that they were facing a fiscal cliff, they just kept the party going. Those funds are no longer available, nor is the $50 million in savings the district spent on last year's budget deficit. She said, we essentially emptied the piggy bank. There's nothing left. How you know your roof on your house is falling down. You know that it's about to collapse. You know that it's coming. But instead, you just bring in props and buckets and everything else until it all just, we're just going to keep the party going and ignore it until it absolutely comes crashing down on us. What kind of sense? Who are these people? Who are these people that you've put in your school districts and your school boards? And this is not just an Anchorage problem. This is a Fairbanks problem. This is a problem everywhere. They all want to just keep the party going at the status quo. They've known that there's a fiscal cliff, and all they've done is fight to continue the status quo. No proactive saying, look, we can see it's coming. We know we have fewer students than we did today than we did previously. So we're going to have to start to plan. No, we want to keep it going at the same level. I mean, this is madness. On top of that, by the way, the end of the article, the district recently reached a tentative agreement with the teachers union for a 3-year contract. Chief financial officer for the district said that under the proposal, next year's 5% pay raise would cost the district $6 million. So, I mean, again, baked in, people, come on. They've known they were facing a fiscal cliff for years. Absolute madness. All right, we got to go. We'll be back. Chris Story's coming up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. A little bit of positivity up next.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. We're in the break right now. I see Chris has joined us in the green room. We're going to get to him here in just a hot second because, he's a mensch. He's a real mensch. We're going to talk with Chris here and be part of that. Let me pull up the proper accoutrement for him. All right, there we go. Chris Storr. I'm going to be checking in with him here in a second. Let me get back to the chat room real quick to see what we need to, where we are. The ASG school board, says Miguel, this is what happens also for not following federal law on funds. I think he was talking about what the federal guidance was, don't spend this on reoccurring, this one-time money on reoccurring things, and they did it anyway. They did it anyway. Jesse said some of the classrooms could have 2 teachers with still having less buildings to maintain. I mean, yeah. Again, 50% capacity on a lot of the schools in the Anchorage School District. I'm sorry, ghost students, just like ghost daycares. I see. Just scrolling backwards here. See if there's anything else. Jeremy says, taxing me more would mean more money in my pocket. What kind of retard believes that? Okay. Well, so first of all, again, I said it was all contingent on a spending cap, Jeremy. And if there's a spending cap, they can only take in so much money. And if they take that money in from a sales tax, then that would mean there would be more money for the payout of the dividend, meaning there would be more spendable dollars in your pocket. It's hard. It's math, I know, but it's a math thing. And in fact, it would be the difference between a citizen's paying for 86% of their government through PFD cuts or 63% of their government through sales tax, with the offset of that being outsiders and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a math thing. The Alaska Municipal League is not your friend. Yeah. I got it. I'm sorry. I'm just reading some of this stuff. Yeah. Joshua says, LMAO, we cut the sports as usual. But I'm actually supportive of having absolutely no publicly supported sports, bread and circuses. I mean, that's the thing. Of course, they're going to cut the gifted and talented program, the Ignite program, the sports program. Those are all the things they're going to cut. But again, she admits it right there. They've known there's been a fiscal cliff for years, and they've done nothing about it. I mean, that's what Chris does, right? That's what Chris Story does. He does that all right, Chris. You do that all the time. You see a fiscal cliff coming, and you just slam on the gas, right? You don't slow down. You just keep things going.
That's right. Especially if I've got Michael's credit card in my pocket.
Yes,
that's exactly what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, you double down. You hit the nitrous switch on that one. You're going straight forward. You're going to bridge that gap. Chris Story, the man from Homer, joins us this morning. How are you doing, my friend? How are things going?
Going great. I got no complaints. No, none in the world. I mean, it's dark, so we don't really know what today's going to look like. But I think you and I both know it's going to be a pretty great day.
I think it's a great day. Every day above ground, every day where I put my feet on the ground and stand up out of bed is a good day. I feel like I didn't. Hey, look, I actually woke up. That's a plus. You know what I mean?
Wait a minute. You put your feet on the ground when you wake up? Are you homeless? Michael, are you unhoused? We need to talk, my friend.
I love to feel the dirt between my toes. That's just all I can say. Just love to feel the dirt between my toes.
It's either that or you need to get a vacuum.
Oh yeah. Well, it is what it is. At least it's not cow pies between my toes. That's all I'm saying.
That's right.
All right. So what's your pick your poison today, my friend? What's your topic for today?
One magic skill to rule them all. See, I geared this towards you as a Lord of the Rings kind of nerd. Yeah. So one magic skill to rule them all.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe. I mean, come on. This is what it's all about, man. If you can't nerd out on Lord of the Rings, you're dead to me. That's all I'm saying. I mean, that is some classic stuff right there. Have you ever seen Lord of the Rings, Chris?
Oh, I've tried, Michael. They just put me to sleep. They're just I couldn't be more bored. I've tried to watch them. I may do it again. I may try again, but I find it to be, look, if I can't sleep, put on one of those movies, boom, lights out.
Are you being serious right now? You've never watched Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
You just sleep?
No. Look, Peter Jackson, New Zealand, love them both, but I just can't get into it.
I question your imaginative style. I question your creativity. You can't get into the Lord of the Rings. I mean, all right. We're about to jump into it here, folks. Chris Story, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget to share the show. Hit the share button. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Ring the bell. Do all that stuff. Let's get to it. Here we go.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Chris Story joins us on this beautiful Tuesday to talk about wood ticks, lunatics, and politics. No. He's here to talk about self-help and improvement and self. What do they call that? Self-actualization? Is that what it is, Chris? The ideation? I'm not sure. Anyway, he's here today to talk to us about the one skill to rule them all. Although I feel like that's a bit of a heretical thing because you've never watched Lord of the Rings. So, I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, again, I did that for the benefit of you. I wanted you to be able to, look, I want to help assimilate into your nerd culture. And so I'm doing the best I can. So one magic skill to rule them all. But really what I want to talk about is communication 4 ways. So that's kind of my lead in to help you kind of jump on board, is just to bring up Lord of the Rings. And I've tried, again, I really would like to, I want to like them. I really do. I just can't.
I don't know what to say to you, man. I mean, if I'm going to watch Lord of the Rings, it's the extended version, 3.5, 4 hours.
Oh.
I'm going to watch the whole thing. You need a Cliff Notes.
Please.
You need a 30-minute synopsis of the Lord of the Rings, I guess. Apparently, that's the only, because you've got the attention span of a gnat. But okay. All right. Let's talk about the one magic skill to rule them all, which was just your serious way to talk to me about communication. What do you got?
That's it. Exactly. It's communication. So I've got 4 C's of communication. I was thinking about it last night. I was thinking that in every business, not just broadcasting, not just sales, not just politics, or trying to become an economist to help people see what is going on in the world, every single thing, every endeavor, relationship, everything we want to do, accomplish, everything can become better with effective communication. And I thought, well, how would I break it down? And I've read a lot of books, so none of this is about from my mind. It's, I think, a simulation of a lot of things that I've read about or learned about in communication. So this is just my quick Cliff Notes. You don't need to watch the extended version to get this. So first of all, we have to be clear. If we're going to communicate, be clear. And R.R.L. Stein, or whoever wrote Lord of the Rings, could have probably taken a page from that. And let's be a little more clear. Ain't nobody going to speak Elvish.
Did you just conflate R.L. Stine, who wrote all the Goosebumps book, with J.R.R. Tolkien? Did you just really?
Man,
Okay.
I feel like I'm going to get disconnected at
You-
any second here, and the red button's going to get mashed.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we need to be clear in our communication, and you and I are both in worlds where there's certain nomenclature and jargon and anachronisms that we can use to kind of as shortcuts to communicate with each other. But when we're communicating outside of that sphere of interest or endeavor, you got to be clear. You have to be so clear that anybody can understand what you're saying. And I'm in the process of writing my next Jacob Mann book, and he's obviously a realtor, and he's talking to a young man that's never bought a home before, and really trying to break it down into the simplest terms. And he says, look, I want to be as clear as daylight here when we talk about this. Now, things are going to get misunderstood, and things go very, very wrong. But that said, the effort is always to drop the jargon and just speak like a person. And he talks about, and this is a real event that happened in my life. One of the very first offers I wrote, I had just gotten my real estate license, and there's a lot of law and case law and things you study. You're not a lawyer. They don't even pretend you're getting anywhere close to having any sense of that. But you do learn a lot of these terms and jargon and the law and case studies. And so I put a bunch of that into a contract, and I handed it over to another realtor, and they looked at me and laughed and said, God, this is ridiculous. It looks like you swallowed Black's Law's dictionary. Get rid of all this. Say it simple. I was like, oh, thank you. And ever since then, everything I do in that realm is keep it simple. Say it as clear as possible. If you can reduce it to the ridiculous and get something even simpler, then say it as simple and clear as possible. And the second C is to be capable. So that means you do have to have an understanding of what you're talking about. In order to be clear, you have to be capable, and you have to really understand what you're talking about.
All right. Well, I mean, capable and again, I would say have some knowledge and authority, right, in that topic. You can't just be pontificating.
Exactly.
Like we see the men on the street saying things and talking about things that they have absolutely no idea about. You have to be clear, and you have to have the knowledge behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And I needed it to be a C, so I said capable, because that's the truth of it is. You have to have, it's a little bit like the iceberg. Look, when you're communicating, we see the top of the iceberg. What we do not see is everything below the waterline. All of the years or the practice or the study or the books you've read or the things you've experienced that led to a very clear communication and a very capable understanding of what it is you're communicating. And sometimes we're just talking to figure things out. I love what Joan Didion said about writing. She goes, she just goes, I don't know what I think of a thing until I write about it. So it might be to get clear and have the capacity to speak effectively. Maybe you do write about it. Maybe you do sit down. And I don't mean necessarily openly on a social media platform, but I mean maybe in your journal, or just open a Word document on your computer and start writing about this thing you're thinking about. How can I communicate this effectively and clearly? And what is my understanding? What is the foundation on which I stand before I speak? Because we can so often hear it. You talk to a lot more people running for politics than probably anybody else in the state of Alaska. So you really know when you, Michael, are talking to somebody that has an understanding on which they are communicating, or the person who's winging it and kind of trying to hit some talking points that they were maybe handed minutes before they went on air with you.
Right. No, you definitely can see. You could see, maybe the listening public can't see it, but I definitely feel like I could see it when somebody is out of their depth, for sure. All right. Well, that's number 2. What about number 3?
Remain calm. To be able to control the temperature in the room, to be able to set the standard by which you will communicate is often, how do you start? Do you come at somebody? Are you poking them in the eye? Are you being irreverent to try to get a reaction? You've maybe already shut their brain down before they can even hear what you've got to say. So your effective communication is already lost. Your opportunity to communicate and mind meld, to use a Star Wars thing that you would get, to use a mind meld, then, a Vulcan mind meld from, George Lucas's mind. I know your head's about to explode. I love it. But you got to remain calm and be able to connect with people through a way with which they can relate to you. But if you're not calm and you're not coming at this with a clear calm voice and you lower the temperature, or don't even start to turn it up. Don't touch the thermostat. All it takes is one misplaced comment to completely turn the heat up in the room, and you've lost their attention, which means you won't be able to communicate.
I feel attacked. I'll just be honest. I feel attacked.
You are.
Same.
Good that it's working.
Yeah. So because calm, as long as you don't mention deferred maintenance, I'm okay. But yeah, no, I get that, being calm and being the rational one in the room, and knowing the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. Okay, I got it. All right. What's number 4?
Well, and I think I've already demonstrated that, and that's speaking with confidence, even about, when I was intentionally pulling your chain with all of these mixed metaphors of Star Wars and Star Trek. But if you speak with confidence and conviction, not volume, this isn't about being louder, the loudest person in the room, or screaming at people as they drive by. And it's not you're protesting. It's not about that. It's about speaking with confidence and conviction. And if you can do that, then, and you do it calmly, and you are capable, meaning you have an understanding of what you are talking about, and you do it clearly with simple terms and not mixed metaphors, then you're going to become an effective communicator. And that truly is a magic skill that rules all other. It is the people who communicate the best that succeed the most in any endeavor or walk of life. Yeah, that's true of almost everything, to include sports, to include activities like art, or anything that might seem outside the world of communication. It truly, your success and your place in the world will be determined and limited or limitless based on your ability to effectively communicate.
So how do we hone these skills, Chris? To get the 4 C's of communication in there, how do we get started in becoming, calm and confident and capable and clear? How do we do all those things?
I think number 1 is being aware that there is a formula, and that there's a system by which you can use and repeat and replicate and get similar results to people you admire who were incredible communicators. Just study Ronald Reagan for half a minute. Number 2, I would say follow the rule of Joe Stump. Never open your mouth unless what you're about to say will improve upon the silence. And if you're talking about things you do not understand, you cannot clearly articulate it, you cannot remain calm because you're so worked up and irrational, and you're not confident because of all of those things underpinning that, then you might as well just stay quiet. My friend Dick Seinhorst said, Chris, never pass up an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. Both of that and Joe Stump's rule will help us all in the communicating, whatever it is we're talking about, politics to economic policy.
I just think that we shouldn't invite Chris Story back to the show until he's actually watched Lord of the Rings, so that he can have an understanding and really have some capability in what he's talking about. That's what I think. I don't know about you guys, but I think maybe we should make that a rule. Chris Story, the man from Homer. You can find all of his books at ilovehomeralaska.com, including The Backyard Millionaire, The Schoolyard Millionaire, and the Jacob Mann books, everything else. ilovehomeralaska.com. Chris, as always, thank you, my friend. You made it entertaining, and that was the important part, for me to be entertained. So appreciate it. Thank you for coming on board.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Hold the line for just a second, Chris. All right, folks, we're out of time for today. We got to go. Tomorrow's another one. Somebody's coming on tomorrow, and I've already forgotten who it was. But on Thursday, we'll have Ben Carpenter on the program. Back with more. Be kind, love one another, live well. Dude, seriously. I feel bad. I feel like you've missed out on a great part of life by not watching the Lord of the Rings series. And I'm going to call Tiffany and talk to her about it, where I'm going to encourage her to encourage you to sit down and just, wow. I'm kind of blown away. Have you ever watched Star Wars?
Yeah. Years ago. I went to when it was the Homer Family Theater. I think it was the second movie. Was that The Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah. So you never saw the
We
first
went to see it at the theater.
But you watched the second
one.
one.
I did not see the first one, but we watched the second one at the theater. And I think I watched the original trilogy at some point, on beta or VHS or whatever. But
no Lord of the Rings, no Hobbit, no great What do you watch? Do you watch like Grey's Anatomy or something? Is that your? I mean,
okay. So growing up, I think you came to Lord of the Rings as a young person, right?
yes.
Would you say
I
okay?
read
So
the books when I was younger. Because yes.
oh, you read the books. Wow, that's a feat. That's
I
interesting.
can read.
Well,
Read.
we okay, all right. I read Terry's blog, and she said you couldn't. That's okay. No, I liked Bruce Lee movies. Anything with kung fu, anything with a bit of mystery or intrigue. I loved crime movies, and I'm gonna put one more thing in here that might surprise you. I absolutely loved, and this probably will blow your mind and maybe ruin our friendship at the same time. Little Shop of Horrors with Rick Moranis and Steve Martin and Bill Murray, and that was an amazing movie that I would not pass that up. If that's on, I'm staying on that channel.
Feed me, Seymour. I mean, I could see it. I love that too.
Yeah,
I just find it mind blowing that you, as an author of both positivity and mystery and fiction, haven't ever read or watched Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's just, to me, that's you're not the
I went to
person.
a Christian school for a long time. Many years went to a Christian school, and we watched a cartoon version of The Hobbit.
Sure.
When I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and I liked that. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't strike me as, but
That's
these
the Rankin
movies are like
Bass.
3 hours long, though, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that the Rankin Bass Hobbit was amazing. I watched that about 100 times when I was a kid, growing up, because we had it on Betamax. But yeah, these new movies are 3 hours long, and they're worth every minute of it. That's the cut version. If you get the extended version, they're almost 4 hours long. You're trying to tell a story here, baby. You got to go do it. Anyway, you're not the man I thought you were, but that's okay.
Well, look, somebody just put in your comments that somebody called Sourdough said Gandalf is the embodiment of positivity. That may encourage me, and that comment alone might encourage me to just go ahead and watch it. Which is the first one? Is it literally just called Lord of the Rings, or is it something else?
Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings. That's the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Fellowship of the Rings is the first one, then the Two Towers, then the Return of the King, and they're all analogous to the Return of Christ. I just want you to know that. So there you go. All right, we got to go. Thanks, my friend. Good to talk.
Michael. Thank you
for sticking with us. I appreciate it. We'll see you. We'll see you next week. All right. I don't know. This guy, Chris, no Lord of the Rings, no Star Wars. Whew. All right, we got to go. We'll see you guys. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.